Welcome to the Hot Dish, comfort food for rural America. I'm Heidi Heitkamp.
And I'm Joel Heitkamp. Today, we're joined by a very funny guy, the Liberal Redneck, Trae Crowder. You're all going to love this episode. Trae grew up in a small town in rural Tennessee. That's right, Middle Tennessee. He's hugely popular on YouTube and Instagram. He co-hosts multiple podcasts, including The Weekly Skews, Putting on Airs, and Well Read podcast. Trae has two books. That's right, The Liberal Redneck Manifesto, Dragging Dixie Out of the Dark, and Round Here and Over Yonder, a front porch travel guide by two progressive hillbillies. Yes, that's a thing. Trae, good to have you on the Hot Dish.
It's a little contrast, Trae, to hillbillyology. Huh?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Anytime, it's always the titles of those two books. I always have to laugh at them whenever someone else has to read them all. They are kind of ridiculous. I acknowledge that. I always put that. I don't know if it's changed, but in my experience with publishing, and I had two different publishers, they love like a subtitle, like a colon and a subtitle. I don't know. It felt like the titles just kept expanding for both of those. And I always feel kind of silly in retrospect. But anyway, yeah, glad to be here.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the special election in Tennessee, part of the world that you're pretty familiar with, part of the country you're pretty familiar with. And I think there's been a lot of, a 9-point spread from a plus 22 to a plus 9, pretty remarkable. But there's a lot of people who think that had we run a more moderate candidate, that would have narrowed substantially. When you look at the debate that's happening right now, because we know that more progressive candidates are really energizing a big part of the base. That's critically important if we're going to win. But also we can't alienate those folks that we might want to win back. The old Tennessee kind of coalition when Al Gore used to win there. And so, what's your take on that special election, Trae?
I don't want to. Yeah. So first of all, I spend every Christmas in that district. That is true, but it's also like I'm in a very particular part of it. That district is weird the way it's shaped. Like a lot of districts in this country, doesn't really make any sense. They split Nashville up into 3, and 1/3 of it got put into this district, which also includes one of the most rural, one of the most red counties in Tennessee. I think it literally is the most red county in Tennessee. It's called Wayne County, and that's where my wife is from. That's where my in-laws live. So I spend every Christmas in Wayne County specifically. That's important because Wayne County is not, it doesn't mean it's like the entire rest of that district. It's probably the redneckiest part or whatever, and that's the part I'm most familiar with. But I don't want to fence sit or whatever. I think it might be kind of a combination. I feel like I can make arguments in both directions for the question that you asked, because I think that, you could argue that Afton's performance there, a lot of it had to do with people getting energized or whatever and coming out in response to a lot of the flack that was getting thrown her way. And if it was a more traditional moderate candidate, there might not have been as much of that. It might not have got as heated and as much eyes on it and resources behind it in the first place. But also, I think that as someone who goes to Wayne County all the time, I think that if there had been a candidate who all of a sudden they become aware, oh, there's a real shot at this. You see what's going on, all this mudflinging in this race, and people start paying attention. And then that candidate had been a a white dude, a straight white man who was talking about grocery prices and that type of thing, then, maybe more people in Wayne County specifically might have voted for them. So I think it's a combination of the two, because it's definitely the rural parts of that county, which are most of it, is not going to be crazy on board with an opinionated progressive woman, probably. So yeah, I mean, I can, I feel like I can sort of argue it in both directions. I think that it's hard to get people excited and energized for a more classic moderate Democratic candidate these days. And so that makes things hard. But in some of these places, like Tennessee 7 in particular, it's also a real tough row to hoe for someone like Afton too. So I think, and I know it's so what does that mean? It's just a no-win proposition. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's like difficult, complex, and nuanced in my opinion. It just depends on the person and the circumstances, I think.
Well, Trae, let me add this, though. From the rural area, which is who we talk to here on the Hot Dish, it's not always easy to find candidates. And then to find candidates that are as aggressive and willing to go out and work like Afton. I mean, we can talk about whether or not she was too progressive, but we can't talk about whether or not she ran a tough race. That doesn't sell.
Right. Well, even her being radical, from my perspective on it, I feel like she went out of her way to try to focus on the actual campaign trail and in actual appearances. And in that context, she went out of her way to focus on sort of meat and potatoes, kitchen table type stuff about like grocery prices and affordability and everything, which I think is smart. And that's like economically progressive, I know, but it's not considered by most people to be like radical. And I feel like a lot of the radical arguments came from, things that they dug up in Oppo of old, like appearances and stuff where she's calling herself a radical or she's, getting thrown out of an office and crying or this type of stuff. They just made her look like, like a loud, shrill harpy or whatever. Again, a lot of it comes back to like misogyny and stuff. And that, as someone who's I'm not from Nashville, but I also go to Nashville every year as a comedian. And I grew up going to Nashville because I am from Middle Tennessee. The whole thing that they went after her for about how like this is you're going to elect someone to represent Nashville who admittedly hates Nashville. The clips they played of her talking about how she hates, Nashville. But everything she said about Nashville is stuff that any like legit native, not just to Nashville, but the area, completely 100% agrees with. I literally had a clip from a podcast appearance I was on less than like 2 months ago that I posted where I said the exact same things that she said about Nashville. Cause it's not like hating Nashville. It's hating the stuff that's happened to Nashville recently because it's made it worse to a lot of people. A lot of it got blown out of proportion. And I don't think she's as radical as people made her out to be, in my opinion.
Trae, I want to make this point, and I think, I'm not just blowing smoke your direction. There are so many people now who are unabashedly talking like you, come from places like we come from, is saying, look, quit demonizing our places, start talking about what we need to do for the rest of the country, but don't be afraid to be who you are. I just read a statement today that in Texas, we're competing everywhere, which hasn't happened in a long, long time. And I really credit, to some degree, the Hot Dish, but also all of these people talking about what you can do. What can an individual do in this very, very difficult time? And one of the things that we're saying is you can run for office. And so we're seeing record number of people stepping up. I mean, Joel's point is it's hard to find people, but we're also now seeing a lot of candidates coming through the woodwork saying it's time to make my voice heard. What can we be doing that would be more helpful to those candidates kind of moving forward to help move hearts and minds?
If by we, you mean like people in like our position who like, talk about these things.
Talkers, influencers.
Try to Afton did my political podcast the week before the election or whatever. And I posted about her and that type of stuff. And now, I'm from Middle Tennessee and everything. So I was definitely paying more attention to that one specifically, but I try to, just try to like help out if I can, if it's a candidate that I like and, align with, meaning like, with whatever platform I have and that type of thing. I'm not sure, how much more it depends. There's people with much bigger platforms that can reach further and everything, but that's really, beyond that, I'm not sure. Just try to support them and prop them up a little bit.
So I want to ask this, and it's probably a question for both of you, which is, we talked about how you can find candidates and hopefully there's ones that want to get out there and run an aggressive race, all of that. But, part of what we do here on the Hot Dish and part of what others do when they have these conversations is really try to get rural America, farm country, all of that thinking. thinking about their future, thinking about, who supports them and who doesn't. So I got to ask this. What happens when you get the sense that the Republican Party, in this case, President Trump, actually buy off the rural country? $12 billion is a lot of money. And so, Trae, I want to ask you, I'm sitting out there on my talk show all the time making the argument that, hey, these tariffs aren't working. All we're doing is sitting there losing market long term. And then the next thing you know, they hold a press conference, say, we're Santa Claus, we're sending you money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know that's upsetting because it's like, I think there was a certain percentage of people that even if he hadn't done that, no matter how bad things got for them as a direct result of decisions that he made, I think there was a certain percentage that still were just going to, go along with it to their own detriment because they just got their heels dug too far in. But you had to hope that there was a large enough chunk, though, who could be swayed. And it seems like, going back to the Afton thing and a lot of things people are pointing at, that like there's, maybe that's starting to happen with some of these like voting blocks or whatever, that it's finally, things could be shifting because it's gotten, clear enough at a certain point. But when you think that they would have like been by his side no matter what happened, and then the idea that, so then when he buys them off, basically, you pretty much know that that's probably going to work. Well, I feel like
the one thing that I would say, Joel, is I don't know how the lady who's cooking the hot lunch in a rural school is going to benefit.
Well, she's not. $12 billion.
Heidi. I don't know how the CNA at the local nursing home is going to benefit. Right. And and I know that at some point that the people in rural America watch this very closely, and you get a lot of people calling who are from rural America, Joel, who don't like this, who think that it's unfair. And when the numbers come out and it shows that people who own land like Bessett and Bill Gates and those folks are people who are going to be subsidized by this $12 billion. And it's going to be some of the wealthiest people in rural America who are going to be subsidized by the $12 billion. That doesn't trickle down. I mean, back in the day, Trae, our dad delivered bulk fuel, and everybody bought their seed in town. They used the local implement dealership. They bought their fuel in town, and so that money trickled down into rural communities. Now they're buying in bulk. You see semis come in and basically fuel up a farm, or so you aren't seeing the kind of rural economic development that comes from that money. And so I'm really curious to see how it's going to be dispersed, Joel, and I'm really curious to see how many people are going to be getting a whole lot of money who otherwise have had some pretty good years.
Well, one other thing, and I'm going to throw this at you, Trae, that there's less farmers. Lost in all of this is there's less farmers. And so if you have less farmers, it's helping less people. Going back to what you said, Heidi, you're sitting there, and in the old days, you had farmers farming 500, 600 acres. Where I'm from now, they're farming 5,000 acres.
And that's an average farmer.
Yeah. And so you're sitting there, Trae, where normally, you can buy them off, but you're buying way less people off.
Yeah, no, I'm hopeful that all that will matter. You used the phrase earlier, like that's not going to trickle down or whatnot, but I feel like, trickle down economics has been pretty baldly not working for most people for a very long time. And I'm just like jaded and cynical is all it is. I see all these things, like there's so many times, so many points over the years where I've been like, well, surely this will like matter, right? Or they'll see, and it's just, I'm not saying I'm utterly bereft of hope. I am hopeful right now that can happen. I guess I'm also, trying to temper expectations somewhat, because I just think it's like, I don't know, with how strong propaganda is and some of the bubbles that people live in and all this stuff, as insane as it might be, that there still will be people that will find a way to blame all of those hardships on even Joe Biden or Barack Obama or whoever, still, like, even no matter how long they've not been in power
office.
So
the interesting thing to me is what's happening in healthcare. I think healthcare is going to have a lot bigger effect in rural America. That the exchanges, a lot of people in rural America overuse the exchanges, especially in places that didn't expand the Medicaid, engage in Medicaid
Right.
expansion. And so those subsidies are critical for those lower income folks. And, the Republicans now have floated an idea that they're going to do these basically HSAs. They're going to do health savings accounts, put some money in there, and then have people have high deductibles. Every legitimate, economist and healthcare expert who has studied this had said that's a formula for disaster because remember this, over 50% of the people in this country could not afford a $500 hit to their budget, but they're going to give them a highly deductible plan at 16, at $2,000-$3,000. And they're going to be in medical debt. There's no doubt about it if something happens. And so I think healthcare is if I were running in a rural district right now, I would really be talking about what's happening in healthcare.
I mean, I completely agree. Using my hometown as an example, Salina, Tennessee, Clay County, the hospital there that was there my whole childhood and years before has closed and reopened, I think 3 times in the past 8 years or whatever, but has been closed for good now for, quite some time. And then also this, with the big, beautiful bill and some of the implications of that, it's possible that even the nursing home could end up closing and stuff like that. And there's been no jobs or anything there for a while, absolutely just economic devastation in Clay County. And, up until very recently, it had still just been very much so. It still is MAGA country, I'm sure, but it was hardcore MAGA country in spite of all that, which I was always annoyed and confused by, sort of. But, and I don't even know how much this means. I might have told y'all this the last time I was on there, so I'll try to do a shorter version of it. But my uncle is the co-chair of the Clay County Democratic Party. And for years and years, it was him, his co-chair, and then 2 other people. That was the Clay County Democratic Party meetings, for a long time. And he has told me that recently, their meetings, it's close to 40 people or something. So that's, a 10-fold increase. And it's only 40 people, but it's still surely that means something. And I was talking about Wayne County earlier. My wife is from it. That's the reddest county in Tennessee. And in Afton's race, it was an almost 7-point, upward swing for the Dem candidate from the last time there. And so it was still much less than the Republican candidate got, but it was much more than, any Democrat usually gets there. And it's so I feel stuff like that. It's it seems like it means something, hopefully it does. I can buy the feeling that it's is the tide finally maybe starting to turn, people have finally been pushed too far, and it's gotten harder and harder to realistically blame it on anyone else at a certain point. So maybe that's finally starting to matter and to happen.
Well, the one thing it's doing, speaking as somebody who recently went over to the western part of Minnesota in the 7th district and spoke at a fundraiser over there. I walked in the room, and I'd done that before. I'd walked in the room and there was over 300 people there this time. They had to order more pizza. They had to go find some chairs from the Legion Hall. There was over 300 people there. Now that doesn't sound like a lot to everybody listening to the Hot Dish, but for them, it was. And it was not the fact that they had a great keynote speaker. That was not it. The truth of the matter is these people, everybody there, some with money, some without, but everybody there gave some money. Some might have been $10 and some might have been $20. Some might have been $1,000. I don't know. I know they had a very, very successful fundraiser. They had 2 candidates running against each other for the opportunity to take on an incumbent in what has been a pretty red district. There's an energy out there, you guys. There really is.
So Trae, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about your style. Because I think one of the reasons why you have such a faithful following, one of the reasons why we wanted you on the podcast is you do 2 things. you speak common sense, and you do it with a lot of humor. And a little cussing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which,
But,
Heidi, I still can't figure out why we can't cuss on here more. But you go
you can
ahead.
cuss all you want,
Yeah.
Joel. You can cuss all you
Yeah.
want. But I think that, for so long, the Democrats have just been so afraid of political correctness or what to say and what not to say and who you're going to alienate. And I think the charm of what you're doing and a lot of other folks are doing is just let it rip. I mean, this is the way I see it. You don't like it, turn it off. But I'm going to tell you how I see it. How do we get more folks to, especially candidates, to take that approach?
I mean, I don't know. Because I don't know. I don't have really any real like experience at all in like the world of politics. So I don't know if these candidates are like, in my head, I always assumed that they're going through these like media training and they have all these like consultants and campaign people and stuff, and they're coached on all this. And I don't know anything about it because I don't have any firsthand experience with it, but I've suspected for a long time that a lot of that is pretty outdated, especially like on the Democrat side. I mean, there were reports of like in the Harris-Walz campaign, at one point, like when he first came on board and for a while there, it was like real energized and stuff. And then there were reports that like these teams were brought in that had worked on like, old campaigns and it's like Walz had been calling them all weird. And he said like he was, told, like advised, hey, maybe don't do that, when that was like working great. Is what you were just saying, just like letting it rip. And he was doing that. And then he got reined in some. And it's like, so I feel like there's on the Democrat side, especially, it seems like there's this sort of old power structure that's still there in terms of how it's all supposed to work. That's like, I think, even if you get a candidate that's special, those people might coach out of them what makes them special if they don't, make it a point to be kind of a maverick or go in the other direction or something. But everything I just said, I've pulled out of my butt. Like I said, I don't know.
But it was right.
Or just say something that means something, not
right.
blah, 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 blah. I mean, when the people hear blah, 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 they're like, what are you talking about? And, the one lesson that we should all learn from Donald Trump is he may use word salad, but people think he's funny. People think he's engaging, and they think that he is genuine in what he says, even though what he says is batshit crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like the first big thing when people, like when he first started being taken seriously as a thing, Donald Trump in 2016, that was like the main thing that was being said is like, well, he tells it like it is. That's, like, what is this appeal that he's having? Well, he tells it like it is, and he's different. He's an outsider, and not all that stuff, So, I mean, no, I definitely think that I fully agree that it would behoove candidates to take a page out of that book and be a little more authentic and, like you say, what they mean, stand their ground, all of that. I'm just saying I feel like a lot of times when you watch politicians and candidates, it's like when you see a lot of high level athletes, sometimes they give like, you just feel like the politician on them and everything like is so carefully worded and all this stuff. And it just feels like kind of artificial and manufactured, and whatever it is that's making that happen or putting that in place, like that needs to go away, in my opinion, or be replaced by something else, like a new paradigm or philosophy needs to take the place of that behind the scenes in the world of like, politics on the American left.
As a talk show host, let me give you an example of my approach. And Republican area, and I've been able to stay number one for 20 some years. I know that my audience didn't like going to school. They didn't. They went to school. They had to go to school. They used school to get where they're at, but they didn't like going to school. And so why would you talk to them as though you're teaching them constantly, and saying 20 words when 2 would do? And Trae, that's why you're so popular. It isn't as though they're talking to a guy they could have a beer with, and that matters.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I appreciate you saying that about me, but yeah, overall, I agree. But yeah, in terms, like you said, like how to fix it, I just think that there's something needs to happen in the world of big Democrat or the DNC or whatever system it is these candidates tend to come up through. I think they're getting corrupted in that way along the way, and that needs to stop. But I don't, I don't know how to achieve that. I have nothing to do with it personally.
I think it's so interesting because people always talk about money. Kamala Harris spent a lot more money than Donald Trump did.
Mm-hmm.
Lot more, lot of money, and a lot of these Senate races, a lot of money. And it wasn't the lack of money that caused the problem. And so, it was a lack of authenticity. It was a lack of an idea. It was a lack of the ability to actually sit down with people and say, hey, you got grocery problems. You got problems doing this. This is what we're going to do. Your health care is not affordable. You can't get mental health care for your kid. This is what we're going to do. And just be straight up and be honest about what you're going to do. And I think that, the one thing that influencers are doing, and I don't mean to, if that's insulting to you, I don't mean to insult you, but the one thing that people are listening to that are people are entertained, number one, they're entertaining. And number two, they talk truth and common sense. And if there is some, kind of, number one, it's really hard to take somebody who is wonky and say, now be authentic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, now be like a real person.
Right.
And so we need to let the real people of these districts, the real people of these states nominate their own candidates and quit interfering because they know what resonates and what works.
Well, one more thing.
And that's a problem too.
And I know,
is this
Trae,
top-down management.
I know you got to go, Trae, but one more thing that I want to throw out there. As a talk show host, there's nothing better than a guest that you don't know what they're going to say. Nothing better.
Right.
And I can tell you this, with the Democratic and with the consulting and with everything that goes with it, you know what they're going to say.
Right.
Before you ask the question, you know what they're going to say, and it's boring as hell. So, Trae, I know
what they're going to say, Joel. They're going to say blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
blah,
exactly.
Blah, blah, blah.
Trae, I know you got to go. You got 100 people pulling at you, but thanks for joining us on The Hot Dish.
No, thanks for having me.
It's always great. And keep up doing what you're doing. More people, we need more people like you speaking truth to power and revealing why it is that we need to bring common sense back to public policy.
Well, y'all are too sweet. I appreciate it. I'll just say real quick before I go, check me out if you don't already on the internet there. It's Trae Crowder, Trae Crowder on your preferred social media platform, but also TraeCrowder.com is where all my tour dates are. So come see me live.
I just, as a Justified fan, Crowder's kind of a famous name.
Yeah, no relation,
with
cousin
right?
Boyd, right? Yes, no.
Thank you, Trae. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate
it. See ya.
So, Heidi, we've had conversations here on One Country at length about rural America and what rural America thinks, does, how they operate, mostly the economy. That's an area that, you're very, very good at. So let me ask you this. Can $12 billion buy out the hearts and souls of rural America?
No, I don't think so. I think that, Donald Trump has a distorted view of what rural America is. I mean, he does very well in rural America. Let's not kid ourselves. But he thinks that it's all about agriculture, and he doesn't realize that small mom and pop manufacturers who are part of an incredibly important supply chain, they're part of this too, and they're hurting really bad. I talked to someone who is very knowledgeable who said that in the next 10 years, we may not have any mom and pop manufacturers anymore. And that is a tragedy because we need that resilience in the supply chain. He doesn't understand how significant healthcare is to rural America. He keeps talking about he wants to put the money in the pocket of people who are getting health care, but that totally ignores who are buying insurance, but that totally ignores the risk pool. All of those people who are healthy are going to do just fine. Those people who need to enter a risk pool, who may have pre-existing conditions, who their rates are going to go much higher. And, totally ignoring what's happening both on the Medicaid side and on the Obamacare enhanced subsidies is totally tone deaf about what is happening in rural America. And then you add on top of that, a lot of people from probably downtown Chicago, go to the Target or they go to their local grocery store and man, those prices are high. I want you to think that you have to pay, $5, $10 round trip gas in your car to go buy those groceries. I mean, everything is really challenging. And when you look at home heating fuel, if we have a tough winter, cutting programs like LIHEAP, which helps people afford their home heating fuels, rural America uses public services at a higher rate. They're more elderly. And he thinks that they are just these wealthy farmers who have been knocking on his door saying, we need relief for our row crops when they're farming, 10,000, 50,000 acres. I just don't see it. And I don't see that money trickling down in the community.
Yeah. The other thing I would add, going back to what you said about healthcare, is oftentimes with two income families, one being the farm or the ranch, the other one goes to town and works. And the reason they go to town and work is so that they can have healthcare. They're not as concerned about the wage as what they are about the healthcare, because they know what that's going to cost. So let me add one more thing in. There aren't as many farmers. There aren't as many people doing that. And so the workers and finding workers has been a problem in rural America for quite a while. Now you add in the fact that the healthcare is going to be through the roof, and because those small businesses are using the exchange, Heidi. They are, which means less employees, or maybe, as you pointed out, less businesses.
Yeah. I mean, so if your worker, your employer that is not required because of your size to basically provide health insurance, a lot of times competition is tough for workers. You basically say, hey, I will up your salary and you can go out on the exchange and buy it. Now, all of a sudden, that's 2-3 times more than what it was before. And, what I keep asking is, how is this $12 billion going to help the CNA in the nursing home who's living on minimum wage? How is it going to help the school cook? How is it going to help the school janitor? How is it going to help the school teacher? Many of which in rural America are underpaid, and a lot of them qualify for government services. And so, I think that this idea that we're going to subsidize farmers and that's going to solve our problem in rural America, I think it's naive.
Yeah, but the 12 billion is going to make the farmers feel better, and the 12 billion is going
Wouldn't it make you feel better?
Well, the 12 billion is going to make the bankers, the farmers. I don't know that it'll go all the way to the implement dealers, but they're going to use this. And I can tell you this as a talk show host, because they call in a lot and make this argument that he cares. This proves he cares. And you know what? The Chinese deal, and the reason we're in trouble on soybeans with China is because of Joe Biden and his trade policies. I point out
my God.
that the last trade agreement that we had with China, Donald Trump made. I point out that it's the tariffs. The tariffs are a huge part of the problem, and that we're losing this market long term, that more investment by China is being made in Brazil and Argentina, for example. And a lot of them get it, but a lot of them don't. Yeah. And I don't know how we turn that corner, Heidi. I really don't.
I think that my question, then I'd say, well, when Joe Biden was president, then you didn't sell any soybeans to China. Is that right?
$14 a bushel.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't sell any soybeans to China. So it's Joe Biden's fault because, this has been going on a long time. This is the result of an ill-advised trade war. And I don't know if you saw, Joel, the numbers, but, China's not trading with us to the same level, but they have a trade surplus of billions of dollars because they're trading with the rest of the world. The United States of America is less than 3% of Chinese exports to the United States, less than 3% of Chinese GDP. And absolutely missing the boat in terms of leverage there. And the Chinese are playing the long game. And Donald Trump, it's like, you hurt my feelings, so I'm not going to talk to you this week. There's no real plan here. And, Joel, the other thing I want to bring up is, explain to me how anyone can justify bombing boats in the Caribbean. I'm not going to dispute whether they're running cocaine or not, but then turning around and pardoning somebody who was a drug kingpin in his own country. I mean, and he has pardoned a lot of drug dealers. And so, I mean, I just want to ask people, how do you explain that to me? How do you explain two guys, floating on some flopsum in the middle of the Caribbean? We're going to take them out. But by the way, unlock the key of the jail to people who are actually peddling this stuff in our country.
Well, and I can explain it to you. There's a whole group of people out there who love the machoism. They do. They absolutely love it. Oh man, look at that. Whoa, look at the technology we use. That type of attitude. Now, what they don't want to do is show you the after. They don't want to show you the survivors. They don't want to show you all of that because now it becomes human. That could be you. You're no longer this vicious drug dealer as much as what you are this person that's struggling to stay alive. And it humanizes things a little bit. I think it's really, really interesting that you can be Pete Hegseth, you can be Donald Trump, you can go ahead and criticize reporters, call the women reporters piggy or ugly or whatever you want, and usually people of color, and get by with that crap. But if people see somebody hanging onto a boat trying to live, and then America going back and blowing them up, that isn't going to sell, Heidi. That isn't going to sell.
It's hard to imagine that it would, but even I think we've all now looked at the second strike, and there's been a lot of attention. There's not enough attention to the first strike. And the only one who is really speaking eloquently about it is Rand Paul, saying we're not at war. I think George Will had the best line. Pete Hegseth might be the only person guilty of a war crime when there was no war.
Oh, there's a lot of truth to that, and thank God he said it. Hopefully more Americans will hear it. I just think personally, it's all about those guys that for the first time ever have a connection to politics. They stayed away from it. They thought leaders on both sides of the aisle kissed way too much butt, were too big of wimps. And now all of a sudden they've got that guy that lives his life the way they live theirs, not caring about anybody else. They want him because of that, because they hope he gets 4 wives, Heidi.
So think about this, Joel. Think about this. They accuse the Democrats of being the nanny state, but we have a Secretary of Transportation that says, don't wear your jammies when you get on airplanes. Don't eat sugar. Don't do this. I mean, they are the government of big government.
Yeah.
All the conservative people in the world, all of those people that we grew up with who say, I just want the government out of my business. That's the last thing that this government is doing. This administration is doing.
Do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene told the truth when she said behind that closed door, all
absolutely.
Republican Congress members laugh at him?
Yeah. Well, I was in the Senate during the first term, and his favorabilities, if people are honest, are very, very low. There's only just a few people, probably including Congressman or Senator Kramer and Tuberville and people like that, who really respect him. I think that there is a clear lack of respect for him, but I think he has been so successful in imposing fear of their jobs. And I'm like, why would you want the job if somebody can intimidate you like that?
How did you grow up being that person that's so afraid of your own shadow that you're truly a chicken shit? I mean, I don't get it. That job wouldn't be that important to me that I'm going to kiss his butt, but apparently to a lot of them it is. Now, for Christmas, what'd you get me?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because you told me I could not. But I was expecting some deer sausage.
Yeah. What's it worth to you? Because, nothing's free.
You get a calendar.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. And you work really hard on that. Everybody, you need to know that Heidi works on a calendar that keeps this huge family's birthdays and anniversaries and fun pictures and all of that on there. So, okay. The answer then is deer sausage and pepper sticks. How's that?
Just deer sausage.
You chicken. All right. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. You take care, Joel. Thanks for joining us today on The Hot Dish, brought to you by One Country Project. making sure the voices of the rest of us are heard in Washington, D.C.
Learn more at onecountryproject.org. That's onecountryproject.org. Follow us on Substack, Facebook, and Blue Sky. You can also find the One Country Project on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe to us there. We'll be back next week with more hot dish, comfort food for rural America.
Topica.